Good morning. I am bringing you this second week in October's autism news, and I'm going to kick this week off with some news that affects people who aren't just on the spectrum, but people with a variety of developmental disabilities. The National Council on Disabilities is calling on officials to clarify that individuals with developmental disabilities should not be disqualified from receiving life-saving organ transplants. The council found that many organ transplant centers continue to bar or caution against putting people with developmental disabilities on their organ transplant lists. This practice of not putting people with developmental disabilities on these lists is in violation of federal law, but even in the 9 states that have state laws against this practice, the council found that the problem still persists. Neil Romano is the chairman of the National Council on Disability. And he said, "We live in a world where organ denials are based on disability rather than suitability. Receiving an organ to save your life should never be jeopardized because of fears, myths, and stereotypes about disability, especially not with so many federal laws making that practice illegal." The report found that when a transplant is unrelated to a person's disability, that their disability will generally have little or no impact on the likelihood of the transplant being successful, and that if the person has adequate support, their disability should also have very limited impact on the ability to adhere to the post-transplant care regimen. The council was also concerned that the organ transplant process doesn't properly protect those with developmental disabilities from being pressured into donating their own organs. The National Council on Disability is calling on the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services and the Department of Justice to issue guidelines spelling out that the Americans with Disabilities Act and Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act of 1973 applies to all stages of the organ transplant process. On the other side of the world, in New Zealand, one of the largest supermarket chains is introducing Quiet Hour, a time for people with autism, anxiety, or just older people who want a quieter shopping experience to be able to have a more pleasant shopping experience each week. The low sensory experience is taking place in Countdown stores every Wednesday from 2:30 to 3:30 in the afternoon. The radios in the stores will be turned off, lights will be dimmed, checkout volumes will be lowered, trolley collections and shelf stocking will be kept to a bare minimum, and there will only be PA announcements in the case of emergencies. The idea was suggested by an employee who had a son who was on the spectrum, and after a year of trying the concept out in select stores, they are now launching it to all 180 of their stores. And here in the US, a lovely children's bookstore has opened in Phoenix, Arizona called Enchanted Corners, and it caters to autistic children. The owner has 2 children who are on the spectrum, and the store celebrated its grand opening this past Saturday, so it has now been open for a week. One article described the bookstore as catering to accessibility for people on the autism spectrum or with other disabilities. The owner spoke about how hard it was to get out and do things with her children, but how when they traveled, there would be stores who were friendly to kids who had sensory needs, and so she took all of those ideas that she got from stores in their travels and she created this bookstore. The store has plenty of color, 24 plants hung around its interior, a bird named Potter, and a Sphinx cat named Bellatrix, who is absolutely adorable. The owner is hoping that Enchanted Chapters is going to serve as a hangout and meeting place for the community, and is planning on holding planned events and activities and meetups in the store. If it is close to you, I would definitely stop by and check it out. Following the passing of the Autism Cares Act at the end of September, I found 2 interesting articles on it this week. And the first talked about how this time there is a language that stipulates that some of the funding be used for adults, but it doesn't say how much. So it's being called out as a priority for the very first time, but we still don't know exactly how much of the funding is going to go to adults, because the language doesn't guarantee that that's where any of the resources are going to go. It is still left up to the agencies who get the funding to decide how the resources are going to be allocated. Meanwhile, Harvard received a $20 million gift that is aimed at unraveling the basic biology behind autism. The gift from Hawk E. Tan and K. Lisa Yang brings the total gifts that they have provided for autism funding at Harvard to nearly $70 million. The gift establishes the Hoff E. Tan and K. Lisa Yang Center for Autism Research at Harvard Medical School. The center has hoped that it will bring together the expertise of a diverse group of scientists and clinicians that work throughout Harvard University, the medical school, and all of the Harvard-affiliated hospitals. They're hoping to understand the biology of autism. That is it for today. Hopefully it wasn't too loud because the kids are home. I did not get this done while they were at school, and it is never quiet here when everyone's home. If you like this video, we would love it if you'd give it a thumbs up, and if you're interested in all things autism, we'd love it if you'd hit subscribe. And I'll see you tomorrow. Bye.